Everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is Design Your Life. This is a series that we actually started about a year ago, and where we've looked to try and implement some of the lessons that we've learned here from, whether it be Stoicism, the Bhagavad Gita, John, all these texts, and try to implement them in a practical way to see how these things have actually can change our lives on a daily basis. So one of those texts that we've actually covered here in the past was a book called Outwitting the Devil. And the book, we'll go through it a little bit, but it has 7 principles that we'll go through this evening that I think are very practical and help us gain some perspective on how we can actually take ideas that we've learned, some of the theories that we've learned here, and put them into practice. So I'm going to share a group of slides. Jang and Ebony, feel free to chime in at any point on any of the slides, and then we'll open it up for questions and discussion, and then we'll take it from there. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So again, the agenda is we're going to do a brief overview of the 7 principles outlined in Outwitting the Devil. Then we're going to have an interactive discussion focusing on these principles. Then we're going to select 2 of the principles for an in-depth exploration. Then we're going to discuss the practical applications of the selected principles and how they can work in our everyday life. And then we're going to break out. We actually have a small enough group where we can just stay in the same room together, I'm thinking, and that we can share our insights, and then we can do some takeaways, and we can go on from there. So a little just brief overview about the book itself. It was originally written in 1938, and it remained unpublished for over 70 years. And this is primarily because they were afraid of the backlash at the time, because it was very critical of institutions, both religious and educational. And as we go through this, you'll see that theme and why maybe it was not the appropriate time to publish the book back in the 30s. The book is based on an imagined interview between Napoleon Hill and the devil himself, in which they go over certain truths from the root of evil, which will basically help us decide how we want to live a good life. The objective of the book is to show the forces that are holding us back from leading a successful life, and the principles enable us to overcome those forces. So the 3 key insights from the book. Now, this is important. There are only 2 bases from which we build our entire lives. It's conviction and fear. That's what the book's premise is. They also use faith as well. So I use the word conviction. I think that they can both be used. The devil's goal is to make all humans like aimless drifters. And if we're not careful, he quickly succeeds. To attain the mental, spiritual, and physical freedom, we must follow the 7 principles that we're going to go over. But I do want to go over what a drifter is. That's an important part of the book. It's someone that has a lack of clarity in their life, a lack of goals, doesn't have an aim. And so they're just drifting through life, and they're susceptible to many different things. They're susceptible to their uh, um, to institutions shaping their understanding of the world, to the outside world influencing their decisions, preventing them from becoming their authentic self. And he has a list, I forget, it's like 20, 25 personality traits of a drifter. And if you go through them, I actually encourage, if you have the book, to go through them and ask yourself, do you have some of these traits? It's a part of confronting yourself. They will, he says, just there's a lack of critical thinking, lack of imagination. Their temper will often get the best of them. They may not be. They're very narrow-minded. So there's a whole list, and I don't want to go through the whole list, but you get the idea, because understanding it's drifting is critical to the book. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is the idea too of this distinction between conviction and fear. When we are in a state of fear, we stay in our comfort zone. We don't try new things, and this prevents us from gaining new experiences, failing, and actually getting obtaining knowledge about the world. And now the devil in the book itself says we have constant fear of poverty, fear of criticism, the fear of death, the fear of loss, which is reasonable. But when we start to act from a place of fear, then we make really maybe decisions that are not aligned with who we really are, our authentic selves. So if you're afraid of criticism, and you probably don't try something that you otherwise would have, not only are you losing that experience, you may be following a different path in life that you really don't necessarily want to follow. So an example would be somebody that's an entrepreneur, that if they were to fail, they couldn't necessarily accept the criticism, accept the all the things that go along with failure, and their fear of that may prevent them from ever trying. Yet that may be something they really want to do. So fear can cause us to do things that aren't in our best interests. Now, conviction, on the other hand, is, as you'll see, it allows us to remain committed through our challenges. If you really truly believe about what you're doing, it's easier to stay committed to finish a project, or you're working for a group that you believe in. If you're bringing education to people and you really believe that that's the most important thing, then you can persevere through very difficult circumstances. You also can focus and prioritize. What I mean by that is, if you have conviction about what you're doing, you know what matters most to you. So you're able to determine, I want to bring, so let's just say an educator, I want to, help kids become educated. That is a priority of yours. And not that it's not balanced with other priorities, but it's a very important point, part of your life. So there's also an element of confidence, which is actually the opposite of somebody who's drifting. Somebody who drifts has no confidence about what they're doing, because they're just aimlessly living and not necessarily identifying their purpose. Whereas if you strongly believe in something, you can kind of overcome any self-doubt because you believe in the mission itself. So if you're doubting yourself, maybe in one particular area, you still believe in the mission, so you'll figure out how to get something done. So I just wanted to cover that because I think that sets the tone for the other 7 principles. So principle 1, definiteness of purpose. Victory goes to the
Joe,
people who.
sorry.
Yeah,
I wanted
sure.
to say something about the previous slide.
Oh, please
Sorry.
go ahead. Please go ahead.
When you were talking about Drifter, I was thinking, it seemed like to me it was such an abstract concept in a book. And so for me to bring it into a concrete context, I was thinking of social media and how people will tell you all the time. And this is how easy it is to drift. For example, you say I'm just going to take a 5-minute break and I'm just going to look at social media really quick. And then all of a sudden they're like, they've been sucked in for 2 hours and everything that they meant to do that day, everything that they had, that they wanted to work on has been sucked into this uh, social media whirlwind. And, it's so easy, like distraction is so easy. Even if you plan on something, if you're not careful in what you're thinking about, or even careful in how you take a break, that break could just consume your whole day. And I was thinking of C.S. Lewis, the Screw Tape Letters. And, that was another conversation, with the devil trying to teach, the demon how to control a person. And they were like, you don't stray them away from church. What you do is you bring up an argument that they had that morning, and then you totally distract them. So it's just for people to be aware. It's just those practical ways. Like, think about that. Like, it's so easy to get distracted and then drift. So just wanted to add that point in.
Yes, thank you, Avani. Great point. So principle 1, definiteness of purpose. And victory goes to the people who know what they want and are determined to have it. They have mastered their habits. They have definite policies, definite plans, and definite objectives. To truly achieve success and enjoy freedom, it's crucial to first determine your life's goals and identify the person you aspire to become. You must be willing to sacrifice anything that doesn't push you towards freedom and success. If you hesitate, procrastinate, or become indefinite in your purpose, you will begin losing control of your self-determination. This is the fundamental principle that drives everything else. And so in the book itself, it talks about how one very important point is that we're taught facts. And so what does that mean? We're taught facts by institutions, and we're not necessarily taught to think critically. And so in order to really determine our goals, we actually have to think for ourselves. We can't just think the way institutions or societies telling us to act. So that's one of the main ideas with finding your purpose, becoming your authentic self. One of the things that they also went over is that the idea of procrastination and how procrastination can actually detract from your definiteness of purpose. It can lead to anxiety, and it becomes a habit, and you're constantly pushing things out. And, if you really think about it, and you have to evaluate, why are you really avoiding these things? And once it becomes a habit, and this book is, as it says, they have mastered their habits, people that have definiteness of purpose, that then you start to really, it impacts your life, it impacts relationships. So that was one example where the devil says, it says to Napoleon Hill, essentially, Mr. Earthbound, that I have them if they start procrastinating. So in other words, he's able to kind of claim their soul and make them drifters. So there's that aspect of it too. Now, this is also, how do you define your purpose? This is a deep question, and I'm not going to go into it too deeply here. But we did do a values clarification exercise back about, I think it was, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. And it's based on Aristotle, and it was and Socratic questioning. And it's, why am I doing this task? You start to ask yourself, well, why am I working at this place? And the reason you're working at this place is so that you can make money. And okay, why are you making money? Support your family. So the underlying value is your family. It's a very simplistic version, but that's a way of really trying to ask yourselves a series of questions that allows you to identify your values. And once you identify your values, your purpose becomes, I think, obvious. So that then you can start to determine how to best use your energy and how to focus, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Really are in line with what your values are, and you can now act in the world with your values. So I think that, and there's a whole list of questions that I can provide that would help with clarifying values. But it's one of the most difficult but important exercises whenever you're attempting to do, identify what you want to do, whether it be in the workplace or whether you be at home for your own personal values. So, do you have any comments or? Okay, no. All right. So the next one is mastery over self-mastery. Self-mastery contemplates sufficient control over appetites to enable one to feed themselves what they need and withhold what is not needed. Self-discipline is your ability to make choices that bring you closer to your long-term goals, regardless of what you crave and feel at any given time. If you learn to control your appetite and channel your energy into activities that bring you closer to your purpose, then if you cannot master yourself through self-discipline, you will be left accepting whatever life throws at you, which means you won't be the designer of your own life, preventing you from attaining success and freedom. So for this particular slide, I think that this is one of the more important parts of the book as well. They're all important, but I think this one really gets to the core of talk. We talked a lot about here, about moving towards the center, which is becoming our authentic self, and not necessarily pursuing things that have very little value. And so once you decided what your values are, you can start to discipline yourself and put the controls, for lack of a better term, in place that allow you to have the discipline to execute that you've put together in trying to achieve your purpose. So I think that for this particular slide, it was for me. It talks about well, just really quickly, the mastery of self requires mastering your desire for food, your desire for sex, and loosely organized opinions, and that's very important. Um, Loosely organized opinions are opinions that are not grounded in facts, not out, and people often offer these opinions quite regularly. But it's the exact opposite of somebody that thinks critically. It's somebody that allows their bias to creep in, because they're not necessarily aware enough to know their bias is actually causing them to act a certain way. So it really takes away from their ability to pursue what is meaningful to them, to find their purpose, or if they found their purpose, to even execute. So that's the how the devil and Napoleon Hill are exchanging, uh, um, exchanging words about, just how this can be a distraction from what you're actually trying to achieve. So that's and are you good, Avani? Not
Yeah.
okay.
Um, I just for principle number 2, I think mastery over self, and all those things are important, like self-discipline. But I think if we go back to principle 1, um, which is, definiteness of purpose, if you're not careful, you could do self-discipline for self-discipline's sake, um, without having any real goal. So you're just kind of like, for me, it just seems like if you don't have definiteness of purpose, you have no reason to do the self-discipline, and the self-discipline becomes something that controls you instead of you controlling it, and it could rob you of the joy if you're not sure of what you want. And I think that's why that principle number 1 is such a foundation. I think you're right, Joe. It really is a foundation, because if you, even with mastery over yourself, why are you mastering yourself? Why not just go out and have fun and have a great time? If you don't really have a purpose, that number 2 will eventually drop, because you have no real reason.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I think that's why the number 1 is like the foundation, and these are the ways that you get to your purpose. I think
Yeah.
so. Just knowing your purpose will help you with mastering oneself.
Yeah, I want to chime in because I don't think I'm the most disciplined person. And I actually observed, I actually got a book on discipline. I observed, the most disciplined people actually may be the military people. And artists usually are more or less disciplined. And it's like Dominic said, I think it's kind of like a balance between, I think art is more like they know themselves, what they love. Like you can do the things you love without discipline. You can do a great job, devote all your passion, your time on it. So I think it's a person I found there's a weird kind of like balance between this discipline and passion, like when you have passion, you don't need discipline to do things. And discipline seems is more like, it seems people have too much discipline. Usually they lost themselves, lost their, what they really truly passionate about. I just found there's a conflict between these two. Yeah, I haven't totally figured out. I just observed how that, how that works. Anyway.
Yeah, thank you. No, this is, I think that if you develop a purpose, then you have to develop a very specific roadmap on how to get there and how you're going to measure that. And then that enables you to have the discipline to execute the plan. And if the plan needs to change, that's fine. You need something measurable in order to move forward.
Yeah. That's the thing, you know, I think there's an analogy, like you have a goal and it's kind of like you have a purpose. You go like hiking, we all go up the hill, going somewhere. But at the same time, you need to enjoy life. You know, you need to enjoy the view along the way. So so you need to go to the top. You also need, and I think some people too purpose driven, sometimes they forgot to enjoy the view on the way. And some people maybe they're drifting. They're enjoying so much they forgot where they're going. I think it's, to me, life is more a balance between you need to go where you need to be. At the same time, remember to enjoy the whole process. Instead of like you just get there to fulfill your purpose, then you don't really enjoy the process. I think that's what we talk about a lot about the, you know, enjoy the moment. You know, everybody want to enjoy the moment. Why we can't enjoy the moment? Because we have things we want to accomplish. But there's a conflict, but how we balance that? We need to go to top of the hill. At the same time, we need to enjoy the view on the way. I think that's kind of the hard part we have to do, you know, like balancing the purpose and the moment we can enjoy.
Thank you, Jang. So now we'll move on to principle 3, learning from adversity. Life gives no immunity against adversity, but life gives to everyone the power of positive thought, which is sufficient to master all circumstances of adversity and convert them into benefits. Failure is merely a perception. Consequently, being perception, it falls within the realm of your control. If you are willing to confront defeat and take responsibility for defeat, adversity becomes a blessing in disguise. It can also bring you insight that you would never have discovered otherwise. Adversity highlights the importance of self-discipline. This is a very powerful statement too. If something goes wrong, you have the discipline and actually the belief in what you're doing to persevere through obstacles. That's something that allows you, when things are, you know, get a little bit difficult in life, which it's inevitable, that if you're doing something you want, you're doing something you believe in, and you have, you know, a certain discipline, you'll work through it. It's reminds me a lot of in Stoicism, and every one of these slides actually I can relate to Stoicism, but is the obstacle is the way. And that's something where sometimes an obstacle comes in your way, and there are new opportunities that are available to you that wouldn't have been there before. And the ability to work through that obstacle will determine whether you're able to move forward, or if it's going to cause you to go into a state of drifting. I'll just say that. The one line that I really liked about this well is that it's in your mind. You know, this idea of failure. This is the kind of the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy. You know, essentially, if you can reframe, how do you define failure? If you tried something and failed, that's not necessarily a failure. You learned, you did something that no one else was doing, you got outside your comfort zone, and you confronted your fear. So with that, you have to frame it in a way, not as a failure, but as an experience, and that you learn from. So I think that that's a very important part. The insights as well that you would have gotten through failure, I think, is also important to note. And what I mean by that is, I was just in a discussion the other day. I know sometimes, you know, a lot of people are critical of a book, or, you know, or even an author, and that's their right. But many people haven't written a book and gone through that process. And I bet I think that they would have a whole lot more sympathy for the individual that wrote the book, even if they disagreed with the opinions, because you go through that process. And what I'm saying is, the more experiences you have, the more you get outside your comfort zone, and the more things you do, the more empathy and appreciation you're going to have for what other people do, because you're getting their perspective, and you'll respect their skill set as well as your own. So I think that that's learning from adversity is something, and it's a habit. I really think the journaling is very important here, because every day you can learn something new, and as you journal, you start to see patterns in your behavior. How do you accept setbacks, and what needs to change on how you accept those setbacks? So, if you guys have any comments about that.
I think Sabrina want to say something.
Okay. Well, Sabrina, could you hold your comments to the end?
Yeah, just to let everyone know, I am keeping track of who put their exclamation point up. So
Okay.
I'm
So-
writing it down too. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, we can keep track. But I do have something to add really quick.
Go ahead.
I think the two things from slide 3 is acceptance and working versus not working, which is how I frame things. I used to think of things in terms of failure and like accepting failure, but it has such a negative connotation that you almost don't want to use that word. So I always say if something worked or something didn't work. And it doesn't mean that your idea is bad. It just means that you tried a path and it just didn't work. So you have to figure out something new. And I think when you frame it as it's not working, then it's easier to change than to just give up. It's just, okay, it didn't work. It's no blame. It's no, it's just an acceptance of it, which is the second thing I wanted to talk about really quick, which is acceptance. I think that's the key in that one too, is you gotta accept that there's things that are going to happen that's outside of your control. And if it is within your control, then you do something about it. But when it's not within your control and there's really no action to take, you just accept it and then you can move forward. And I think reframing it as working and not working means you could just say it's not working and then move forward and find something that does work. So it helps with discovery.
Yeah. Also, I want to chime in. Is failure? It's actually the time frame. If you stop, then you stop pursuing something, then you failed. But if keep going, you always have the chance to get there. Just like you trying to get up top of the mountain. Maybe this road is blocked, so you can't get there from here. Then maybe you turn around, you find another way to go up. So I think it's only when you give up, it's a failure. I want to give an example. For example, before I come to America 20 years ago, I have 3 goals, 3 things I want to do: surfing, ski, and visit architecture. And I ski a lot because it's in Seattle, but I haven't successfully surfed. But then recently I just got into surf skate. I thought, oh my God, maybe it's still achievable one day. So I think if I'm not dying, I'll give up totally. Maybe it's not failure. It's just like extent of time. Maybe it's take longer than we thought. I think anything you want to do, as long as you don't totally give up, you always have the opportunity to get there. Maybe it's a different route than you initially imagined. It's the time frame where you want to give, where you want this to end. If you don't want it to end, you always have the possibility to achieve it one day or the other. So it's never a failure if you don't give up.
Excellent points. Thank you for sharing that, Chang. It's good to have real stories, so that people can, once you put personal experiences to these principles, I think then it kind of helps facilitate the discussion later on. So controlling environmental influence. Those who control the environmental influences out of which their habits are built are masters of their own earthly destinies, and that all others are mastered by earthly destinies. Your environment includes all mental and physical forces that impact and influence you. Being in an environment that doesn't support your life's purpose will not help you achieve success and freedom. Change your environment into a positive one. Be with a group of people who help one another achieve their definite of purpose. And I think, to be quite honest, what I thought of here was, 52 living ideas. We all have a similar goal. We have a community, and we are a community of learners, and we reinforce that value. So being around people that that have different experiences, that share their perspectives, has been invaluable. Granted, this is virtual. They also talk about the physical aspect of it. If you're, putting yourself in a position where you're trying to, I'm trying to think of a appropriate example in the book, because I use some examples that I would rather not use. Let's just take the example of maybe cleaning a room. That's a good example in the sense that if you're cleaning your room, you're paying attention to details in your life, and it's a metaphor for other parts of your life. We did actually a whole discussion on one of our Friday nights about an admiral who had given a speech at the University of Texas about making your bed every morning and why that was so important. So that's what, the other thing I would say is that, how do you change a negative environment into a positive environment? That's a very good question to ask yourself. It's not about just the environment. It's about how can you, essentially bring positive change to an environment. So you don't necessarily look for the environment to develop you. You look to see how you can fit into the environment in a positive way. So that's pretty much all I have. Is there any other quotes?
I actually want to share, my husband at MBA program, there's this guy, this older guy from Boeing, and he never go to massage. And at first we found, oh, it's pretty weird, like he said, he doesn't want to be in an environment that he will not feel comfortable. It's extreme, example, but I found, a lot of time humans are weak. We thought we're strong, and we see things happen to people, and because humans actually are pretty weak. So if we don't want to be tempted in certain environment, maybe it's better not to be in the environment in the first place. So I think, a lot of time, things happen to other people we don't agree with. It could happen to us too if we're in the similar environment. So I think it's important to be around the positive people. And that's why I agree with Joe about this group, because people are easily drifted in this society. There are constantly kind of things to distract people. Like there are all kind of holidays every time, all kind of things, like people go to doing the same, like purely watching, all this salmon festival. There are always things to do. If you don't have a purpose to build up to something, you can waste your life enjoyably every day. Maybe some people's life value is like that, but it's people you want to build something out of your life, then you really have, I think the time is like water. If you can drift, let all the water spread out, or you can accumulate the water to create some kind of electricity or power. It's like how we collect these times, like water, how we not waste it on everything, like doesn't produce anything or it doesn't create anything. So I think it's very hard in this society, all kinds of distractions, very easy to be drifted.
Thank you, Jane. Do you have a comment?
Yeah,
Ebony?
just really quickly. Something we were talking about yesterday, in the sense of community, and I think another way you could look at this is you surround yourself with people or a community that has like a similar goals. And it's not to be exclusionary, but when you have people that are going towards the same goal or similar goals, or goals that align with yours, or you can help each other out, that's another way that when you build community like that, that's another way that you can push yourself towards your goals. But like, it goes back to knowing what you want, your definiteness of purpose. And then once you know that, then you will, I think, there's this thing called law of attraction. You will attract to like-minded people towards you. And I think that's why so many people are attracted to this group, because our goal here is to always learn from each other. And I think that's the beauty of, this group. And I think we are also a part of other communities that have other goals. One could say, Jing, for instance, does yoga, and to keep a healthy mind and a healthy body, right? That's common goals. So you can have different communities. You just have to make sure that the community that you're in the environment that you're in, make sure you're building a community that where you are working towards your goals. I mean, and so, because if you're in a community that's not to say that the community is bad, but it's not good for you, because that's not where you're going. And that's fine, because there's so many different paths that one can take in life. And I won't say all of them, but most of those paths can work towards the good of humanity. And I think that's key too, looking at it, like when you're defining your purpose, like, is this not only going to help me, but is it also going to help humanity? So just thinking of it like that as well.
Thank you, Ebony. So we'll go to number 5. Use your time wisely. Time penalizes the individual for all negative thoughts and rewards him for all positive thoughts, according to the nature and purpose of the thoughts. The passing of time allows our habits to become permanent. If you have trained your mind to think positively and healthily, time becomes your friend. But if you're filled with negative thoughts and habits, time becomes your enemy. If you spend time thinking and acting out of healthy habits in a self-determined manner, time will give you wisdom. So for this is just building off of how the other previous principles factor in, and over a period of time you develop a set of habits that will enable you to grow old gracefully, as I would say, in the sense that you'll be constantly in a state where you're trying to learn, and that type of learning will lead to wisdom. If you are a individual who does not develop good habits, those habits get exacerbated at an older age, and people often can result in dire situation. So I think that this is really, when Aristotle talks about habits as the importance of pursuing virtue, I think that that's right on point. So anyway, we've talked about habits here in the past, and I think that this is one of them. This is what it's talking about: is develop good habits, and you'll use your time wisely, because you'll be organized. So. Make harmony work for you. Negative influences are forced into association with one another, no matter where they may be. Positive influences does definitely into association with one another. This law requires everything within range of one another to interact harmoniously. This explains why hanging out with negative and lazy people is fatal. Similarly, you attract situations, environments, and people like you, and are also drawn by those similar to you. This is why you must be self-determined. Be energetically present and demand what you desire from life. Otherwise, your surroundings will have control over you. And this leads to the idea of having definite purpose. If you are self-determined, you'll attract people that are also self-determined, because they want to get things done, whether it be learning, work, whatever it may be. So you have a similar. Self-determined just means that you're moving towards something. So you may have different values, but you're both moving towards something. And you tend to attract people that are self-determined. And so if you're trying to create your environment. Now, this is not to say, it sounds almost kind of, when I first read this, exclusive to a certain degree. And it's nothing like that, actually. And one of the things that was interesting I thought of is what Epictetus had talked about. And he mentions about keeping good company. And the reason why he says that is because not so much that the individual that's self-determined is so much better than the individual that's not. It's that the individual that's self-determined, that may have a goal, doesn't necessarily have the will to not fall into bad habits. So it's a recognition of humility in that sense. And then so I can get a little bit more comfortable with that. And with that, we'll go to number 7, because we're going a little long here. Exercise caution. Without the exercise of caution in the choice of all associates, no one may be certain of success in any calling. On the other hand, lack of exercise of caution brings almost certain defeat in whatever one undertakes. When you are not cautious, you tend to act impulsively without considering consequences beforehand. This behavior is risky because it hinders you from aligning your actions with your life's purpose and core values. When someone wants to be close to you, evaluate first whether they will uplift you or will just introduce you to unhealthy habits. Learning to say no to everything that's not aligned with your life's purpose may speed up your journey to success. That is also, for me personally, something that I need to work on. The ability to say no, you're able to draw boundaries. And that's both good for you and the other person that you're in the relationship with. You're being honest, you're practicing justice in a way. And so, and it leads to a certain level of balance where you're not overcommitted. So having that open communication, being honest with others, and the ability to is critical if you're talking about remaining productive and moving towards your or achieving your purpose in life. So, Evanika or Jang, if you don't, that's no problem. We'll go right to questions.
Yeah,
So
I
we
think
have
we
plenty
can
of
move
people.
forward. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for your patience. I went a little longer than I thought.
Yeah, so I think Sabrina had a question or a comment.
I had two comments. One of them was when you were talking about art. You might be enjoying it, so I paint. You might enjoy it, but there's a point in the painting where it becomes ugly, where you hate it. And unless you have discipline, it will not get done. So I think that's true of many things, that there are things that there are parts that you don't like to do in a project or something that you're trying to get done. You might enjoy most of it, but there's tasks that you will not enjoy. And unless you push through with discipline, you'll let it go. So I think we can't correlate one thing with the other. They have to be hand in hand, or should be. But if you don't have the discipline, you just won't get it done, even if you're enjoying what you're doing, because you might get tired, or something might happen, right? Or it might get too difficult. So that's necessary. And the other thing with failure was that I see failure as learning. Right. And when you see it that way, and you see, okay, what can I learn from this? And then you keep going. So I don't know that it's failure in the sense that you didn't achieve what you were looking for, but you got something out of it. And then you take that, and if you want to keep going with that, you do. Otherwise, you try something else or in a different angle. Anyways, I'll let others speak.
Yeah, I want to respond. So I'm sure everybody have certain extent of discipline. Otherwise, we won't even be doing anything. It's just like some people have stronger discipline versus somebody have less. Like that's why I'm doing architecture, because I love it so much, and there's much fun doing the concept design. But you always the boring stuff. Luckily, you have these things you like that help you carry through the boring stuff that take discipline away. I think also the same as failure is really how you define it. You can call it failure, and to somebody, to me, I don't see it's a failure. So it's kind of like how you can call it failure, then you think I learned from this. And you can also think it's not a failure. It's just part of the process towards my goal. It's just maybe a kind of a turn instead of straight line to my goal. It's kind of a turn. So I think it's really the concept, how we see the things. The word, the definition is so tricky. We all have different definition of the same word. So same as discipline. To somebody, I love working. I actually can work the whole night. I don't need any discipline. I just enjoy it so much. So to somebody, they can do the same thing. They use their discipline. I think it's just what we call it, how we define the word is so differently, or how we perceive the word differently. And I can't remember the name. Emily, I think somebody raised the hand.
Nalini, would you like to go?
Yeah.
It's Nalini followed by Mona.
Yeah.
Can they unmute?
Hi, yes. I just, the first, out of the 7, the first number, I think we talked about the goal, setting the goals. And if you don't have the goals, it talks about like that is the main purpose, is to set the goals. And I think Zhang, if I'm pronouncing it right, she touched upon it. To me, you may not be a goal-oriented, you may not have a goal-oriented mindset. You may be a process-oriented, you may have a process-oriented mindset. In other words, you may not have a goal to become, I do gardening, I do photography, and I love those two things. But they were nowhere in my early years goals. I just decided on a whim that that's what I wanted to do. And I don't know if you will call it goals, because it was not. It was just my passion, my love to those things, which led me to learn about it and create something that I love and cherish and enjoy. And like you said, I can go in a garden, or I can go to shoot pictures, and I can spend time even with a very, I'm sorry, with a very painful back, and I don't realize it because I'm not a goal-oriented person there. I have become a process-oriented person. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah, actually, I want to
Well, I
chime
think,
in. Yeah, sorry, you can go first.
there you go, please.
Yeah, so actually, I want to chime in because I actually very interesting movies. I read a lot of like interviews, and I found a lot of good actors. They don't really have a goal oriented. They just live in the moment, and they end up be the best actor or actress. Because if you're living the best moment at every moment, then you actually will build up to something bigger. So it's kind of interesting. But I noticed most of directors, they're more the goal oriented. I think it's really depends on the type of, and also depend on the thinking and the failure. I don't know if you have done that 16 personality test. I think
Yeah,
a lot of failure
have.
actually they're more the kind of the process are oriented, but maybe you will actually build up to similar result. So I think it's different approach to life, you know.
Yeah,
So,
I think one of the things that the book talks about is how the devil or these institutions try and pull us away from identifying our own purpose and then just defaulting to process. And so that's kind of where the author is looking at it as to, it seems like you're being intentional. It seems like the value had changed, and values can change over periods of time. So, wanting to be a gardener and focusing on the process to be a gardener at this point in your life, I would say you identified the value and you're executing with the process. So I think it's more geared to that are going down avenues that they would have never otherwise have gone down if they hadn't been necessarily going through just the steps, just going through the system and not necessarily thinking about what they wanted to do. It was just basically going to, and this is where it was pretty harsh in criticizing religious institutions and school systems as to how they can be overbearing and influencing an individual's life. and maybe pull them away in that process, away from their authentic self. So for that, I think that's a slightly different thing. I don't think you're too far off, actually, from what Napoleon Hill had in mind with, you're doing something you want to do. One of the questions, actually, in the valuations exercise that I was going to bring up at some point is, what do you do in your free time? And if you do that in your free time, that's something you want to do. So that's a very practical way of looking at it. So it's not pulling you away from what your purpose is or what you want to do. That's just some thoughts. I see Mona's next.
Thank you.
Yes, I was wondering while listening to this presentation and about the way that the drifters were sort of emphasized as you don't want to be that. That's when the devil gets you. But it sounded to me a lot like mindlessness, like to be a drifter is just to be mindless. And the opposite of that would be mindful. And that doesn't necessarily have to do with being goal oriented or not, but if a mindful presence is just like you just said, being in the moment and doing the best with the moment that's happening now, and that may include a goal or not. And I was thinking about how when you are too hung up on a goal, you're basically not living in a moment. Because you're shooting for the future, like when that's going to happen. And I was wondering if that's not just another way the devil gets you.
Yeah. I really think it's a balance, like you want to live in the moment. The reason I think the people don't live in the moment because they not only want to enjoy it now, they also want to enjoy the future, so it's kind of like, and if you just think about the future, you don't enjoy it now. So what's the point to enjoy the future? You don't even enjoy it now. So it seems like the reason we build for the future, because we not only want to enjoy it now, we want to enjoy the future. We want the whole life we can enjoy. So we cannot always, just think about the moment. We have to think about the future, have a past, then we can relax and enjoy the moment. I think it's kind of balanced. Yeah.
Right. But being in the moment or being mindful includes many of the principles that were listed here. Like, for instance,
yeah, exactly. It's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I lost track of all of them, but it felt to me like mindfulness was part of it. And that,
It's
again,
important, yeah.
there is balance. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, because you
okay.
have a goal. It's not like you just hung up on the goal. You have to live in the moment to make it happen, make your future happen at this moment. So you have to emerge in the moment to make the future eventually happen with your, with the process.
Yeah, and I was thinking about how it's a difference between controlling the process or being responsive to what's actually happening. Like it's a subtle difference between feeling what's the reality of the moment and being responsive to that, as opposed to trying to control it to a specific goal, because that includes accommodates also possibility of failure, right? Like if I'm responsive to what's happening, things may or may not work out, but I'm doing the best that I can right now. I'm not hung up on a specific target.
Yeah, I think
what really is the point of the book is to how to be intentional with what you're doing. And I think you talked about it with mindfulness. You need to be mindful, and if you can't necessarily, I don't see how you can be intentional without having identifying a purpose of some sort. I see one of those two, one and the same. because it allows you to say, all right, this is the plan that I've mapped out. And once you mapped out a plan, you get it to a point where you can start to measure if you're actually making progress towards that plan, towards that goal. And that's an important part of it as well. So the mindfulness aspect comes to it into play when you're being more intentional with your actions and balancing your time. And that's where the devil actually can't get to you, because you're using your faculties to do what you have set out to do, become your authentic. So that's that. So the discipline part about it is you're not procrastinating, you're not doing things, you're staying on a schedule, you're doing. So that's the process part that you did talk about as well, that's involved in that. But it does tend to mean that you have a direction that you're moving in. Those are
Yeah,
my thoughts.
yeah. And just to add to that, I think sometimes when we think of goals, we think of it more of like a business sense, and you know, like with business, I think in business, like you have goals, and if you don't meet those goals, then there are consequences, right? And that's the way we think of goals. But I think goals in the sense of what he's talking about here and outwitting the devil is to kind of know what you're about. You know, we go back to the foundation of what is your purpose. It doesn't mean that you're concentrating on that goal 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You know, you're just making sure that the way that in which you're going, or the path that you're going, is going to lead you towards your goals, even if it is something like taking a break, having fun, or going out, making sure that if it's going to work towards your goals, but also it's not going to derail you from your goals. And I think that's an important aspect as well, is to make sure that what you're doing isn't going to derail you. It doesn't necessarily have to always bring you towards your goals, but I think another point that he makes is moderation is the key. He doesn't the devil doesn't say don't drink. He just says the danger is when people don't moderate it. So you can enjoy a glass of wine and be fine. And then there's people, and he uses this example in a book, and there's people that just drink excessively, and that deters them from their goals. So this has become from a thing that you do to relax and maybe refresh yourself and refocus yourself, to this same thing could just derail you. And that's where you have to be careful. And I think when you're talking about controlling the process, um I don't think controlling the process is necessarily a bad thing, as long as you know that sometimes you're going to have to rethink the process. Or, we had a series on Design Your Life where you have to look at the design and see if the design is still working for what you want to achieve. It's kind of like we talk about it also, form follows function, from Louis Sullivan. If the form that you're using no longer works, is no longer taking you towards your purpose, then you have to drop that form. And that form may work for a while, and then it stops working. And it's all evaluative and focus. But I think the key to not letting the devil get you is to derail. And the way the devil derails you from your goals is to distract you, and to make sure that you're not being distracted, and that there's a purpose. So if your purpose is to rest because your brain just can't function anymore working towards the goal for that particular period, that's fine. That's why we have vacations. That's why we have these things, so that you can step back and refresh. And that's perfectly fine. Just as long as you know that's what you're doing, and you don't allow that refresh to derail you from your goal. So I think that's where you have to kind of still be alert and focused and mindful of it.
Okay, Evan, did you have your hand up? So we have a set of questions actually that we can go through. Now, we've prepared a set of questions for each one of the principles, but we thought it might be best, actually after Nalini goes, to take a vote and
I
see
think
what two
Nalini's hand was
principles.
up from a previous one.
No, I think she raised it again. Nalini, would you like to speak?
No, I was just going to, yes, if I may. You know, Avanik, you mentioned a few things, but I was here looking at the presentation and the principle one. And to me, the way it says, it's pretty strong. It says victory goes to the people who know what they want and are determined to have it. They have mastered their habits. They have definite purpose, plans, and definite objectives. And so, and then it goes on to say, to truly achieve success and enjoy freedom, it's crucial to first determine your life goals and identify the person you aspire to become, and so on and so on. So it's not, it to me, it looks like it's pretty strict. Having a purpose is different, but I also agree with Mona, and that again, maybe it comes from the mindfulness, because I study that, and I think she studies from what I have learned from her. Here, it's pretty clear that that's what they want, or the author wants, that it should be a definite goal. And it looks like if you don't have a goal in life, like Mona said, you are a drifter. You're not really a drifter, because your goals can change, and your goals, I mean, to me, it doesn't look like it gives us the flexibility. Now,
Yeah,
I haven't read the book, so I don't know. It could be then the book explains it totally, goes into depth and explains and talks about it more. But just wanted to ask that question, Joe, or Evan, or any one of you.
Yeah, I want to chime in. So we actually had a presentation before, and people have different kind of life, like different level of life. The highest level is with purpose. I think that's what he's talking about. And actually, I'm in the middle. There's freedom, some people, and then below that, it's kind of like the fame and money and accomplishment. So I think everybody kind of living in different kind of like life purpose or whatever, like I think what he's talking about is highest level is a purpose. And I don't think I have reached that level yet. And maybe that's the highest level. And I think it's good. Everybody, if a purpose driven, we can make so much contribution to the world, like Martin Luther King, who's or somebody else. But maybe we are not. Maybe someday we will. So I think the book, is not Bible. It's just somebody's opinion. Give us a view of that, and we take whatever we think is beneficial, I guess, to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think too, I think we're looking at purpose as like this highbrow thing. It doesn't have to be this highbrow thing. It's your life. You like it like when you say a goal, like, and not everybody has a goal. It's like, what do you want to do with your life? That's it. I mean, and that could change as you get older, and it does change. And I think the freedom is you living a life that you want. And I think Joe talked about this in the presentation, not letting anybody else define that for you. So if your goal, Nalini, is to build, have a garden and, grow your garden, great. That's your goal, or if that's what you want to do with your life, you don't even have to call it a goal. You just have to, what you want out of life. in a sense. It doesn't have to be Martin Luther King and civil rights. Mine certainly is not. But I think we just have to have something. And it has to be whatever you want it to be. It doesn't have to have, you know, it could be, you know, to be mindful in life and to really appreciate what you have. That's a purpose. I don't think it has to be this highbrow thing of, you know, make $1 million or, you know, do this thing that we think. I think we have this thing, especially in the Western world, where it kind of has to be something concrete as, you know, I want to have, you know, like the American dream we talk about, like the house and the car and all that. It doesn't have to be that. Like there's people that RV for a living and, you know, they want to go and explore the world. That's their purpose. It's whatever you want it to be. I think it falls in line with this series of Design Your Life, because if you look at previous videos on Design Your Life, there's people that have done things that have been outside of the box, but it's something that they wanted. And I think that's the key. Don't let anybody else define what it should be. It's you, it's your life.
Yeah, I think it's
And I do
intentional.
agree.
Well,
No, and I do
no,
agree, because purpose is very important. But I think, more pointing towards the way it was written, the way I understood it. I personally think, yes, it's very important to have some purpose in life, whether it's to become a painter or to become whatever you want to do. But yes, and I also know that discipline, without discipline, you can't really do much. It's good to live in a moment, but at the same time, you have to think about your real purpose in life too. So, but I was just playing, I think, devil's advocate by, reading that. I will be very honest.
No, I think one confusing thing is that it does skip a step if you're doing it. And this is where I think that I'm trying to work it practically, is the idea is that you really identify what is most important to you. And then that's your purpose. So there's that step that it seems to go and just find your purpose. Well, what's the most thing? What do you, it could be something as simple as, what do you admire most about other people? You know,
Yes.
If that may very well align with your value, it resonates with you. So if you see somebody that's doing something that's like running meetups, and that they're doing it well, and you see that and they're doing it with a certain reason, you have an admiration for that. So that may be something that you value. And so therefore your purpose comes from that. So it's really digging deep to your innermost being and saying, what do I like? And some people will, appreciate material things. And that's what they'll admire, and they'll chase those things. And that may be just the way they are. And I don't think that's a poor choice, but that doesn't matter. I'm just saying that you really have to go through a process of questioning. What do you do in your off time?
Thank you.
So anyway, that's what I think is the most important thing. Mona, thank you for waiting patiently.
Yeah, we have Mona.
Yeah.
I have a couple of points I want to bring up. First is about goal, the purpose. It can be many things, right? For instance, Putin has a purpose and he's working very diligently to achieve that purpose. And that's not a good thing. And there's plenty of other examples. Like I just wanted to give an egregious one just to start. In Buddhism, for instance, when they talk about mindfulness, but they also link it with the aspiration to benefit all human beings. So that's the goal, to become that sort of person that dedicates their lives to benefiting all sentient beings. So that's a different kind of goal than Putin has. And then mindfulness that goes together with this aspiration is a practice, right, that I would sort of subscribe. Right? But I think that it's important to not generalize like without like having a clear sense of what that is, because just to say purpose, that can be anything.
But I think, and this is an important point, because you're talking about something much deeper, about having a philosophy of life. And that's what we've been talking about here. And this is supposed to be like how you put it into action. We've talked about the Gita. What does it really mean? What are they really communicating in there? What is the Gospel of John really communicating to us, other than some of the metaphysical concepts? What does Jesus' actions really mean? What about it, or the Tao Te Ching? What is it really saying? And then you kind of see how it actually can bring peace to your life. These are texts. Now, I would, as you mentioned, a couple of the philosophies of life, where you could be, Stoicism is the obvious one for me that I will bring up. That works for me because there's a lot of things that resonate with me, and I think that it aligns very nicely with some of the texts that we've spoken about. And I think it's predominantly your character is the most important thing. I think if you went to religious, probably say their soul is the most important thing. And I wouldn't make too big of a distinction between those two, in the sense that they can't touch either of them, but these are the most important things in my life. So this is where we're trying to bring it into the practical. So what does that mean? What does it mean to have good character? Then that's where you identify the value, and then you have the virtues or your principles, which drive your actions. And then you have a way of actually understanding cause and effect. You have theory. You have a theory about the world. Stoics have physics, logic, and ethics. And part of that is to understand cause and effect, to understand how to reason, and to how to live a good life is ethics, essentially. So those are three things, but they're all theories. But the actions then become the discipline of desire, action, and assent. And then there are a whole host of actionable things that you can do on a daily basis that make it so that you can live the life that you want and develop the habits that you want, which he talks about here. So the law, or in a way, is, I would say, he's saying that everything he's saying is essentially determine what it is, what it means to live a good life, and then go out and figure out how to do that. When you have philosophies that have been tested over periods of time and that are still debated as to whether or not the best way to live, but you have people that are consciously, mindfully considering what their actions are. It's living intentionally. And so that means the devil is actually not dictating or convincing you to live a certain way. And more importantly, you are following what you believe to be true. And that's and that in and of itself, for the Stoics, provides you with not only tranquility but happiness. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because there is, religions can be considered life. They're usually dogmatic or deontological. They have a belief system already in place, whereas sometimes philosophies are a little bit more open to truth, and then integrating new information, which I think is critical. So anyway, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's it's an important distinction to make. It's the reason why we look at these philosophies, and again, the reason it resonates with me with Stoicism is it's very practical. It has a set of exercises that allows you to, I think, but it's not meant for everybody. Okay, unless we have any other questions.
I think we have Eleanor.
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 Oh, go ahead, please, Eleanor.
I think Mahajan is waiting for a long time. She can go first.
Nalini, do you want to go, or?
No, it's already.
No.
Right.
No, I am done. Thank you, though.
Okay.
I think Sabrina is also there.
Sabrina went out a little earlier.
It's
Okay.
okay. So I was thinking that to be too much goal oriented is maybe can mess up your life in a bad way. Goal oriented means also for me personally be manipulated, which can cause problems down the road. And I have been observing sometimes when people are in flow, and it's almost like drifting, but they're not drifting, they're just enjoying what they're doing. And something they're sacrificing and giving maybe up some of their goals, but they are enjoying. Therefore, I'm not sure which way is the good way. Sometimes I think it depends, by the end of all, it comes to a personality. For some people, it's maybe easy to be goal-oriented. For other people, it's better maybe to go with the flow because they have a personality which allows them to get things easily. Therefore, I don't know, sometimes flow is better as goals. It depends on the situation, and it can take 10 years maybe be in a flow and 10 other years be goal-oriented. And sometimes when you're goal-oriented, it even feels like you're losing. Yeah, I think it's important to balance. This is it.
Yeah, I think I haven't actually. I think what I heard from Joe is the goal. The true goal is actually be yourself, be your true self. I think that's the real goal. So it's not like whoever true self is, maybe your goal could be enjoy the moment. That's your goal. I think the key thing is like whatever you do, you choose it intentionally. You're not passively flow, like drifting in the life. No matter what you do, you don't regret afterwards. I live a life like you have no control, no design. You just passively live through it. You can choose whatever. You can choose to sitting there, enjoy the moment. That's your goal of life. That can be a goal. The goal, I don't think it means you have to be constant moving around, doing some big things. I think from what I heard, the goal is more you be your true self, whoever you want to be, and you choose that way, and you be that way, and you have action to make it happen. So afterwards, you don't regret. You don't passively your life like you didn't be the way you wanted. If you choose to, like somebody choose to live this type of life, and they went through it. That's their goal. You know, it doesn't have to be grand.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. It's about becoming your authentic self and not letting external forces dictate what you're going to do. That's why the criticisms of the institutions that actually had led to them publishing the book, 7 years. So, because it is a pretty harsh criticism of how schools function, as well as religious institutions. And so, yeah, back in the 30s, you would not necessarily have wanted to publish that book.
Just
Well, go ahead.
yeah, just one quick note, and just think of. I think what the book focuses on is like, I think the key to drifting is knowing why you're doing something. You know, in the book, it talks about, people are just working a job, and the way I think of it is like, a lot of people that I worked with in my previous job really didn't have a reason why they were doing it other than they felt like they had to. And they had no, if you ask them, why did you do this? Or why do you like doing what you're doing? And most of them would look at you and say, I don't. I'm doing it to feed my family. I'm doing it to make sure my kids get a college education, all these things. But they really didn't have a why. They had like the standard American answer because, they want their kids to go to college. Well, what if your kids don't want to go to college? And then they're like, oh no, they're going. And that's because that's the way they were raised. And so I think having that definitive purpose and knowing your why, not someone else's why, but your why is key.
So one of the things that I thought we would do is just take a poll on which of the principles that you may want to discuss in a little bit further detail. We have a little bit of time left, and we have a set of questions that we posed to the group, and love to hear your thoughts. And I definitely want to give at least a couple of ideas where we're asking questions like, how can you refine your purpose? And people are actually thinking about actionable steps that they can take, and you can break down your purpose into smaller parts, things like that. And that's just one. We have questions ready for each one of the 7, but they're actionable items that hopefully somebody can take away, because essentially, again, we're trying to take some of the more abstract concepts here and really see how they can identify and change our lives.
Uh-huh.
It could be as simple as determining your priorities. What do you value most? The question I posed during my presentation was a very important one, where a gentleman's like, okay, I work. Well, why do you work? Work, make money. Well, why do you make money? Because I want to support my family. Well, then your family is the underlying value, right? So you don't chase money. You work enough where you actually balance it out so you can focus on your family and work, and there's a balance between the two. So that's just, it's a way of, and that's a very simple way of identifying what is most valuable to you. It's my family, and you didn't necessarily think of it that way. You're just going through life, just doing things, and then that allows you to prioritize there. And I think that's what is the sake of, why are you doing this for, whatever you're doing in the first place. Anyway, I know these are big questions, but I did want to put something on the table with that. So does anybody want to vote on one of the principles that they would wish to cover? Okay, Sabrina, you're one. Nalini, which one are you going for? 5?
Sorry,
So
I'm sorry.
6, 1.
Number 3, learning from adversity. I
Very
was
good.
muted. Sorry.
No problem. Does anybody else wish to vote? Give it another 10 seconds. Okay. So we will go with number learning from adversity. So just so everybody remembers, learning from adversity, we all endure adversity. Part of it is reframing. As I had mentioned, failure is merely a perception. So as a result of that as a result of it being a perception, it falls within the realm of your control. Meaning you're assigning a good or bad value to it. You can say objectively you failed, but assigning a good or bad value to it is your judgment. And so that's an important distinction, because then you could say, yes, I failed, but what would you do different next time? And there are a lot of things I would do different next time. So I think this is a very good one to go through. And that comes back to one of the practical examples of how somebody can overcome adversity is reflect on the lessons learned after the setback. I remember this is it's not the best example, but I remember there was a very, very good baseball pitcher in Washington, D.C. and very famous, and he hurt his arm and he was going to be out and maybe his career would have been over. First thing he did, he went and journaled about it. And, he journaled about, what his experience was like, and what he was learning in this process. And part of it was that he could lose, his livelihood, overnight. And then how was he going to get back? What was going to be the process in order to start to get back? It included surgery and everything, things along those lines. But that's that was a very reasonable way of approaching how to address setbacks. Now, if anybody else has any other things they wish to share, I would love to hear it. When challenged with adversity, what is your first reaction? What is it that you do when you have something that's very challenging come up in your life?
Yeah, I can share my experience. So when I applied for college, I always want to be an architect. So I applied for college, I only applied for architecture. Unfortunately, I get into a planning department. And then later on, I learned somebody else actually is lower grade than me, but have relationship. So they end up in the architecture. So I was very upset because I have this goal and I work hard to it and I could get it, but somebody else kind of get away into it. But later on, I was able to change, switch to the 5th years the 5th year I changed to architecture because they started this new program. But anyway, I just learned from my own experience. It's like a lot of time we have this clear direction, we work hard to it, but then there's a roadblock. But I found if you're persistent with it, there's always a way you can get over it. Maybe it's not, you will get where you want. It just may not be as straight, the clear line as you imagined at the beginning. But as I know people want to do something, maybe it takes a lot of tries, a longer time. But if they want so hard, they will get it. It's happened to so many people. So that's why I think the adversary is just the way to testing you how much you want it. I think it's like if you don't want it, like God, God want to test you. You said, I want this. Then God said, oh, let me try, see you really want it or not. So they test you a few times. If you're persistent, then God will give to you. If you just say you want it, then you try it, then you don't work hard or you don't try hard enough, they said maybe you don't really want it anyway. So they won't give to you.
Mona?
Yeah.
Well, do you want to say something, Evanique?
No, just really quickly, I was going to give an example. Right out of college, when, I was in honors in track one, I was in honors in my high school. And, so getting into college was very easy for me. What wasn't easy was finding a job after college. And I thought, we were taught, you go to college and finding a job would be easy. And it really wasn't. And it took me 2 years and I fell into an industry that I stayed in for 17 years because I thought it was interesting in the insurance industry. But it was one of those things where that was the first time I learned it won't come as easy as you think it will. And what I learned from that adversity is that at the time I was just looking for any type of job. In the beginning, you're idealistic, right? You want the job that you want. And then I had to let go of my ideal and make the insurance job work. And at first I was like, if I get a full-time job, I'm not taking it, right? I'm not going to take this job. And then as I got to know the people and I got to know the industry and I got interested in the industry itself, I was like, well, you know what? I do want to learn more. And I did. And so, sometimes life is just not going to look the way you think it should. That was my lesson.
Mona?
The way I see adversity, at least in my life, is I've met both like success and failure and adversity and all kinds of situations. But the way I see it is that it was a humbling experience for me, because being geared towards success and seeing that I'm failing or I'm encountering so many roadblocks is just humbling constantly. Like, no, it's not what you think. No, it's not going to be that easy. But it's just always getting back to learning about myself and for my own well-being, learning how to deal with that was meant simply understanding that I'm not always going to get it. It's not about me. It's not always going to happen the way I think it's going to happen. And just for me, being mindful about that was how I dealt with adversity. And how it was not about succeeding at all. It was about learning about myself in the end.
Yeah. And I think that's an important share. I hope that everybody actually considers walking away from here. It was well said. I actually had a friend, and this is where I think that it's a sign, a certain value to failure. So he's a roommate, and we worked together, and he went to law school, and I stayed at my firm. And he came back and didn't have a job, and he was staying. And then the only job he could find was working in a Barnes and Noble right next to where we worked. So he would see his old colleagues and everything like that. And, you know, he came home one night and he said, "Boy, I bet you're real disappointed in me and that I'm a failure." And I turned to him and I said, "You just validated everything that I've done at this point, in the sense that the house was, you know, kind of helping people. And so you made it worthwhile." And so he became a very successful lawyer eventually, out in Silicon Valley. And he always had the ability. Sometimes it just didn't, you know, just timing is everything. But what he deemed to be a failure wasn't really a failure. That was what the point I was talking about. You know, it was a failure professionally, but it was not. He was also a person that really valued his character, and he didn't fail in that regard. So I think that sometimes we assign the idea of failure to something when it really isn't a failure. You know, it's a testament to his perseverance, is the way I would have reframed the way he was acting, the way he ended up, because that's the reason he did end up where he was, because he wasn't too proud to take a job that many people would have been too proud to take. And that small thing represented something so much bigger. And so that's how when you handle failure and even what you deem to be a failure, I think that you have to really look closely at that, because you never know where we're going to end up. So anyway, I just wanted to use that example as a way of cognitive reframing the question, because in many ways it was helpful for me personally. So, so does anybody want to go over another one? We still have a few minutes left. If anybody wishes to.
Six, how many? I
I
actually
think
want to share.
Nalini's-
Yeah,
wait,
how many?
Nalini's
The six?
trying to raise her hand, I think.
Oh. Who?
Is everybody on board with
Oh.
that? I think you might be voted out, but you get an extra vote since you're a host.
What's the number now? What is the number now?
Um,
Yeah, we have 6 and 1. Maybe we can cover both.
we have 2-1. I know. It's
Where's 2-1? Only 1.
Okay.
Oh,
That's an
3,
exclamation point.
3.
All right. We can cover 6.
Yeah, so I actually
who-
want to share a story. I joined the house forum yesterday with AIA, and they were talking about they're trying to build this homeless, they try to make the house more affordable, and they have to work with big group of people on this house, kind of like co-housing. And they said, you know, it's very important to remember, you know, everybody not doing things intentionally to block you. So you have to, everybody have the best intention. So we have to think about, we always think when we have somebody think, oh, they're intentionally block us to do certain things. but it's like a group of people, everybody have the best intention. Somehow it didn't align. Then you get into this conflict. And I always found, it's, that's the Tao. We learned Tao Te Ching. I think the best thing I learned about how to find the Tao is harmony. How to find this harmony among people. I want to give an example, like my son is doing this internship in high school, which is the new program. It's very hard to get. And I got quite stressed to help him to get an internship. So I was trying to meet with principal. I gave him the feedback. I said, this is a great idea, but it's not working. It's like the society is capitalist society. Nobody have time to mentor the high school kids once a week. I end up to have to create a position for him at my friend's company. And so I end up meet with the internship director. And so I actually end up become a PTA president, being able to talk to them how to change the program. But I just found out, like when we meet with them, I realized, when you meet with someone to solve a problem, instead of see them as the enemy, you have to find a way, kind of you both solve the thing together. Everybody have the best intention. The reason it's not working because people haven't figured out the best way to make it work. It just works so much better once you think that way. Then it brings everybody together. We met with the director today and with another parent, and we say how the PTSA can help make this program better. We brainstorming different ideas, So I just think it's such a powerful way to bring people together to solve a problem. Then people think we can work harmony together. Basically everybody have the best intention. You just need to find the Tao, the way to make it work, like water, like a flow. So everything is effortless.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to comment on number 6? I mean, I very much believe that this is really important. And it goes to a lot of different things that we've covered here. When I look at number 6, let me just make sure I have the right number there. Well, basically, I think that, you think about first, how can you create, you're taking a sense of responsibility. And that's a form of leadership as well. There's that aspect of it. But I think there's another aspect of it too. You have to be able to ensure your decisions align with your values. And they bring a sense of like of fulfillment and contentment. And that's part of, making harmony work for you. It's also in the sense that your interactions with others, I think, it helps with your reactions with others and how you are around other self-determined people, and that's where it's kind of self-reinforcing. But it's accountability as well. I think that there's a lot of different things that go into the values when we're talking about number 6. So, sorry, I was a little distracted for a moment. I see there are a couple of people in the chat.
I think they were just saying good night.
Oh. Well, if anybody wants to cover one more, we can cover one more. If not, we can
Yeah,
talk
we can
about
go
what we
to
have coming up today.
the purpose. I think that's actually a very critical one.
Didn't we kind of?
I
Okay,
think
we can
someday
cover that
said
really quick.
everyone.
Okay, let's do it.
Maybe it's easier if everybody share what they think their purpose is at this moment. That'd be good.
Well, maybe that's a little personal.
More
Yeah.
practical, right? More.
But what I would like to do is provide a set of questions maybe that help with determining what that is. Okay, so number one was finding your purpose, or definiteness of purpose. Victor Hugo said people who know they're determined, they have it, mastered of their habits. They enjoy the freedom. They're willing to sacrifice. And if you hesitate and procrastinate or become indefinite in your purpose, you'll begin losing control and self-determination. Okay. I think that this skips a step, as I said a little bit earlier. You have to really identify what the most important, and you have to work back into there as to how you're going to execute against those values, and that's your purpose. You don't just decide my purpose is Mona. My purpose is Ebony. You don't just make that decision. You may say my purpose is, my family, my kids, everything, whatever it may be. And once you list those things out, which was kind of me in the face. I put, my family, my sisters, and everything on there, and I realized I controlled none of this. That everything I valued, I controlled none of it. So then I looked at it and said, well, what can I do in order to make the relationships work? And that's when you really start to take, possession of or take responsibility for your own actions. So if I value my sisters, then I need to be a good brother, whatever that means. If I value family, I need to be a good son. If I, value friends, then I need to figure out a way to be a good friend. And that means being there when it's inconvenient. So you have a set of steps that are underneath that. If I value learning, then I need to be on these calls. If I want to work on presentation skills, and Srikanth will allow me, then that's another value that I have, much lower on the scale, but nonetheless, that is something. And it into everything, you figure into what is your purpose. And then there's a way, a pretty sophisticated way that we developed with a group of friends on how to prioritize those things. Now, having a philosophy of life, as we were talking about, you have a set of principles now. So the principles are virtues, and those virtues dictate your interactions with other people. So not only are you working with what is in your control, but you also have compass of asking yourself, what is if I'm being a good friend, is this just? Is this the right thing to do? Is it fair to the other person? And if I don't want to do something, why don't I want to do it? And then it becomes an act of courage to maybe do it. and feel better about yourself. Maybe you're avoiding something. Maybe you're avoiding a conversation that would actually help save a friendship. And you need courage to actually have that conversation. And that could prevent a lot of pain. You draw boundaries. That's where we were talking about the ability to say no. So for me, this book does skip a step. It says, find your definite purpose, but it doesn't give you particulars on how to do that. And in any case that I've ever seen, if you start a business, you have a mission. You know, you're trying to provide a service to someone. If money should follow, that's fine, but you have a mission. And if you start managing yourself to the money instead of the mission, well, then your mission probably is going to suffer. That's a very crude example, but nonetheless, they have a set of values that they were going to provide, a set of value they were going to provide to the community, but they got away from it. And I'll say one last thing. If your actions are no longer aligned with you stated your values are, then you don't know what your values are. If you put down your family as a value and you're out drinking every night, then your family is really not your value. And you really aren't being honest with yourself. And so that's another thing that really kind of comes out of this exercise. And then that gets you closer to your authentic self, which may be an alcoholic, but nonetheless, it's something that you have to determine, what is it you want to be. So anyway, that I think principle 1 is very good. I think there's a lot of different practices that allow you. It's a very difficult thing to list out your values because they change over time, and I think that if you write them out, they may change over these. But I really like the questions of what would you do in your free, what do you do in your free time? What type of job would you have if you would have no anxiety? What type of you're put in a position where you're only going to be working 5 more years. What job would you do? There's a lot. Here it is actually. What would you do if you're guaranteed to succeed and knew you couldn't fail in the situation? So that's not going to necessarily be a guarantee, but something to think about. What would you do? It's a way of drawing out something you would do. Ultimately, what is the most important thing in your life? What do you really want your life to stand for, or be about? Those are all really important questions to be able to ask yourself.
Yeah, I want to say something. I'm not totally sure purpose has to, it's related to value for sure, but I don't really see it have to define by the value. Maybe there's different way to define it. To me, I joined the landmark training and they were talking about self-expression. I think to a lot of people, actually self-expression is kind of like, fulfill potential in a way. It's the purpose. To me, it's kind of like, we come to this life one time or maybe more. What we do in this life, we have so many potential in ourselves, how we can fulfill, like be the true self. What is true self? The true self is the self, if it's all the full potential fulfilled in a way, or more potential can fulfill. That through the self-expression in a way, whatever you do is self-expression. Like you do the presentation, you build the community. I just think people have
Does anybody
different
else?
approach to find the purpose. To me, I don't see the value in the approach I will take. You know, I like the way you do it, but to me, it's more I have different approach to find the purpose.
No, sure, though.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I mean, how do you do it?
yeah, I mentioned my purpose is find the potential, fulfill the potential.
Okay.
Potential myself, you know, like we are talking about the God. I think the God is kind of perfection in a way, like we can never achieve, but we kind of like work towards it. Some kind of perfection is kind of like full potential, like who we want to be, what we can be, what the best version we could, you know, and there's a lot of possibilities. But at the same time, we have limited resource and limited time. With all the unlimited possibilities, that's my struggle too. You know, I have limited time. I have so many things I want to do or want to be, and it's a conflict. Maybe that's the reason I have to make a choice. I think that's the difficult part. Yeah, I'd
Is
like to
anybody
hear
else?
other people's experience.
Yeah. I think the last part that you said, Jing, was perfect. You know, maybe the reason why we have to make a choice as to what we're going to do is because there's so many choices and there's a finite amount of time. You know, it's a phrase called analysis paralysis, or where you trying to make a decision can completely paralyze you. And I think when you're looking at a purpose, you got to see that, or you're looking for a goal or anything. Part of that is trying it out, right? I personally think, part of it is trying out and seeing what works and what doesn't work. You may have several different interests. I would say pick one, see it through. If you find out down the path that this is not it, and you'll know. I think you are the only person that will truly know if this is it or if this is not it. And it's no definite formula, which I think we as Westerners especially definitely look for a definite answer. And when it's coming to like what path to choose, there is no definite answer, but I do think that there's something inside of you that tells you if it's right for you or not. It doesn't mean that the path is wrong necessarily, but it's wrong for you. It doesn't work for you. And I think that's how the only way you know that is to try. And I think it's action, right? And I think there's a good point in taking action. In that, I think one way in which you defeat the devil that truly is just inside of your brain is you try and you take that action, and then you see, do you want to keep pursuing this, or maybe this isn't for me. And I think sometimes we think we should pursue it and see it to the end, but you knew like halfway through that this wasn't for you. And then I think the devil can trick you into keep going, because now this thing that you thought you wanted, it's going to make you miserable. So I think it's knowing when to take action, because that's what you want and that's what's right for you. And then there's a thing where you're saying, you know what? I've tried it. I've seen it through. And at this point, I think I need to stop and take a new path, because this is definitely not it. And again, I just will and say the only person that knows that is you. No one else could tell you that.
Is there anybody else who wishes to share?
I have a tendency to agree with Joe. The important things that I do, the things that I do, I usually choose it based on my values. So, well, my kids were small. I value not just family, but having healthy kids mentally and physically. So I made sure that that was what I was doing, right? And examined all the time, what they were eating, what they were watching and all that stuff. So that they will grow up to be healthy adults. So I do tend to, and even for small things, it might, to me, it might not seem, because I was listening and I'm like, okay, trying to find things that perhaps I see as just a small thing, but even gardening that I like to do. So I value a beautiful garden and flowers and actually the physicalness of it. It's good for the body. So something that might seem small, I think there's a reason why we're doing it, right? Why we choose certain things and not others, because perhaps maybe we wouldn't do them. But I don't know. You know, she might have a point and I'm just not seeing it.
I think you made a very good point. I look at it when you put down your values, and I put them down and I actually rank them. And that will tell you how to allocate your time. And that may sound harsh, but it really does allow you to draw boundaries, as we talked about, have certain degree of self-discipline. And if you need to adjust those boundaries, you can. But all those have to be put into place. And this book is very much just about having a plan in the world to dictate your actions. And however you have to do that, these 7 principles is how Napoleon Hill would approach it. But you can take and find and use all things from all different self-help books. I'm obviously biased by Stoicism, but other than that, this is a very practical book too. So maybe I'll post these in the comments. I'd recommend looking at some of this, and then maybe I'll post a couple of the things to a Donald Robertson website, who's been at 52 Living Ideas twice and has done interviews. Maybe we can get him back, but he has a valuation exercise that's for free. He has one that you pay for too, but he has a free one. Maybe I can just put that to what I was talking about. But in any case, everyone, with that, let me just do some very brief announcements as to what is coming up over the next 2 weeks or week, really. So tomorrow we have Asian philosophy, Gun Sung Long, an ancient Chinese dialectician, and that is 5 o'clock, I believe, Eastern Standard Time. And then on Sunday we have Saint Joan by George Bernard Shaw, one of the great classics plays of all time, one of the most complex. I listened to part of it this week. It's entertaining. I didn't have time to sit there and listen to it. It's only about 3 hours. So it may be worth, just listening to, if you have a few hours. And then diagramming by Kurt McNamara. Kurt has been extremely generous with his time each month, third week of the month. Wait a minute. Yeah, I think it's the third week of the month, where he is presenting to us, about Bucky's principles, but also a lot about system design, for which he has incredible knowledge. It's like it's like taking a course. So I urge you to take advantage of that. Monday, we have Poetic Mondays with Maritza, and the featured poet is Leonard Cohen. Really? Huh. Leonard Cohen a singer? Anyway, I'm just curious now at this point. Yeah, he's a singer and songwriter. Okay. And then I actually quite like that. I just wish it had been Billy Joel. And then the Art of War will be on Tuesday. So, okay, everyone. Have a wonderful Friday evening, and thank you for taking the time to spend it with us. Have a wonderful trip, Jang. You had a very busy 3 days, and you're leaving tomorrow, and you made time. Thank you. And thank you, Ebony, for co-hosting with me, and Nalini, thank you for showing up. It means a lot. As well as Mona, Sabrina, Katie, and Victor. Everybody
And
have a
thank you, Joe.
wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Take care.
Joe.
Good weekend.
Thank you
Thank
for
you so
preparing
much.
this, Joe.